My name is Lauri Novak, and this is the Photo Breakdown.
Photo Breakdown is a podcast where I talk with a photographer, sharing the story of a specific photograph, technique, or business win. I'm your host, Scott Weidenkivowitz, and this is Photo Breakdown. Let's break it down. Hello, my name is Scott Weidenkivowitz, your host of Photo Breakdown, and today I'm sitting down with Lauri Novak to talk about this really cool photo that she shared with me recently. And you're going to have to look at it because this is only an audio podcast, but this is a really cool photo of a building, and there's this gorgeous chair that's floating there on the side of the building that you have to see for yourself. But before we dive in, this episode is sponsored by my lead generation course for photographers called More Leads, More Clients. Yes, if you'd like to increase the leads you're generating on your photography site, you can use the strategies I teach in my course. Access it at scottwine.com/leads. Hey, Lauri.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
Good. I'd say long time no talk, but I talked to you, 2 days ago?
Yeah. Oh, Tuesday, yes.
Tuesday. What's today? Thursday. Yeah. So I talked to you 2 days ago.
I appreciate you asking me to do this. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the show. I think it's going to be a blast to do, and I get to look at a lot of great photos, even more than I do already on it.
But diverse.
Diverse. Yeah, it's going to be very diverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I have 2 questions before we talk about your photo.
Yes.
The first question: if you can live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I'm going to say right off the top of my head, Lake Tahoe, and that's because my mom's brother used to live out there, so we used to go there as kids. Not a ton, and that was my very first solo trip when I was 17 or 18 years old. I flew out, rented a car, and I stayed with relatives, but I was on my own mostly. And it just is one of those places that when I go back there, I feel it grounds me. It's a very peaceful place for me. I don't know if it's the mountains, probably because I tend to be called to mountains and I prefer mountains as opposed to beaches, maybe. It's just one of those places for me where I feel very grounded and at peace, and it's beautiful besides.
Yeah. It's a great reason too, for sure. Yeah, whenever my wife says we're gonna go to the beach, and I'm like, do we really have to go just sit on the beach?
Yeah,
like,
I can't.
Come on.
My husband doesn't even ask that question because he knows better. I'll be like, see you later. Have fun.
Yeah. And it's even more fun when you have 2 little kids.
At least they have fun. At least
they
the
have
kids
fun.
do.
Yeah.
At least you have something to keep you occupied, I suppose.
Yeah, it's not relaxing because you're like paranoid
That's
they're gonna run
true.
into the ocean.
Very true.
So my second question is, if you could remove all physical, mental, and financial barriers and constraints, what project would you do in photography?
I would probably travel the world and write about it. And I would probably go back to places like Antarctica and the Arctic where they're like once in a lifetime trips, but there's so much more there that just doesn't once is not enough. Those are pricey but they're so worth it. And that's probably what I would do. I talk about this with my husband the other day because I used to travel a lot when I was younger and single. And for work, I would always travel places and I would go from wherever I happened to be. It was different though. If I had started like a travel blog like 30 years ago, it's like, I wonder what if, because that's my one true thing that I always have known what I wanted to do is to travel.
Yeah,
that would be it.
Yeah, it is one of those things where it makes you a little jealous of the photographers who did start that photography blog. So many,
yes, exactly. I'm like, why didn't I do that? What was that? Yeah.
Trey Ratcliffe had a genius idea many years ago, and a lot of people tried to do what he was doing, and some people were able to do it successfully and others weren't. But now he gets to do what he wants when he wants, and it's all because of him posting photos for free for people to actually use for free too. Of course, he's got more to his business than just that, but it's a biggie. Okay, so let's break down your photo.
Okay.
So this photo is a gorgeous black and white photo. And so can you talk to me about first, where is this photo? Where did you photograph it?
This is in Chicago. It was taken, one of my friends and I did just walked along the Chicago River Walk, which has just been completed recently. It goes all up and down the Chicago River, the branch that comes in from the Lake Michigan. And we start at one end and head down until we're done, until we either get to the other end or we don't. But the buildings along the river, there's a whole lot of new construction. This happens to be one that's one of the newer constructions at one of the points where the river splits and goes north and south. So it's always changing. The riverfront is still constantly changing, and there's like a new sculpture by Santiago Calatrava there. We went to photograph that, but I tend to always be on the lookout for the cool like buildings,
Right.
structures, shapes, shadows, light on the buildings, or I look down and see the reflections of the buildings in the water.
So the shadows on this are pretty harsh. You got multiple sides of the building. Really, you got three sides of the building if you really want to,
Kind of, yeah.
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 What kind of day was this? This was
So it was actually, oh, it says capture time at 6:30 in the evening.
okay. Yeah, so it was
Which is possible. Yeah. I mean, the sun
this
was
time of
starting to head
year.
down that way. Yeah. And
Yeah,
this was
yeah.
in May. And that obviously is a west facing, if you're looking at it, that's a west facing side
Mhm.
because it's completely lit
Yeah.
by the sun.
One of my favorite things about architecture photos is when you see multiple sides of a building and one side is basically black. You see
Yeah.
that little bit of, you kept some shadows in there so you can still see some. And of course, the main subject of the photo
Yeah.
is perfectly illuminated too.
The deck chair. That's what I called
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So so is that what caught your attention
It is.
or
I just pulled up the original that's totally unedited, and it
Mhm.
still sticks out not quite as much as until it was converted to black and white and made very contrasty. But it's still, I think probably initially what caught my eye is the triangles that the windows that are open make, and the contrast between them
Yes.
and the shiny reflective side of the building. But then I was like, look at that chair. That's just like sitting there perfectly.
Yeah.
So when I converted it, it made it pop. I don't think I had to do too much other than make it a high contrast black and white conversion.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You brought up the windows, and I look at this and I'm like, those windows really add a lot to it because if they were closed,
It wouldn't, yeah.
it
They'd
would
be
be a lot of
white.
empty.
Yeah, it would be
Yeah.
white. And the chair would
Yeah.
still stand out. It might still work, but I think that the windows help draw you up into it. And
Yeah.
then you see the chair and you're like, oh,
And even if the windows also, if they were open, but if they were, let's say, I know this type of building wouldn't have it, but if they were slide up windows to open,
right.
that would change it all too. It
Right,
wouldn't be,
because it wouldn't make
y-
the triangle shapes that they
yeah,
make, and there
yep,
wouldn't be because you can see the reflection of the glass that's open, so the piece that's open is reflected back on the building too.
yeah,
So it's an interesting, again, that's really what caught my eye is those windows, the few windows that were open like that.
yeah. And I also like that the gradation because you have deep blacks, you have bright
Mhm.
whites, and you have those midtones that are just perfectly exposed as according to a perfect exposure. Like you can see everything on the left side, and
And
then
the
you're going,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and then you're going light, then you're going dark. It's just a cool gradation. It's an opposite of a gradation, but it is a in the entire spectrum
Right, well, it's
in the
interesting
photo.
if I look at the histogram because it's tall on both sides and then flat in the middle, which
Yeah,
works. It
yeah,
works,
yeah, yeah. I
It's
mean,
not how it's
especially
supposed to be maybe, but
yeah, yeah. But it's artistic, which is more important than technical histograms.
yes, that right
So
there sums up my photography. It's artistic, which is more important, yes.
yeah, yeah. Could you just talk quickly about the settings for the camera? When everybody looks at this, they
Let's see what
can
we got.
understand
Yep.
how.
I shot this with my Tamron 100 to 400 lens, which is like
Ooh,
90% of what I shoot with. In fact, I've gotten to the point where I almost don't carry any other lenses with me because they end up staying in my bag. It was shot at 400 millimeters. I had the ISO was on 400. It was a little bit of a grayish day. And then what else? Where's the
do you
rest of my
typically tend to
settings?
bring your ISO as low as possible?
Oh, I shoot at 100 as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah,
I still
yeah. Me
have a
too.
film mentality, and
Yeah,
I have a camera that can shoot 1600, but I can still see the noise. Like it bugs
yeah.
me, even though people may not notice it. I do, and I'm almost like obsessive about it. It's kind of dumb, but
On certain, I think in certain things, like in a photo like this, that type of noise would stand out more than it might in some other.
so it
Depends.
was shot at f6.3 at 1/1000th of a second.
Nice. Yeah, that's a
So
good aperture to get that all three sides of that building to be evenly in focus where you need it to be at least. Is that a lens that you need a tripod for, or is that
I
handheld size?
rarely ever shoot with a tripod.
Is the
So
100 to 400, is that's not that really big one time, right?
I think they have a bigger one. I think they
Okay.
have one
Yeah.
that's 500 or 600. I
Yeah, I
should
think
know
that's the
that,
one
but
that,
I
like,
haven't. Yeah.
that's the one you need a
Yeah, you're not
tripod
gonna be
for.
lugging it around.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Anything else you wanna share about this photo before we tell everybody to go check it out?
I don't think so. I think that it's just, again, one of those things that caught my eye, or things that I look for when I'm out looking at architecture, are the things like the windows that make shapes, or the contrast between what is in the frame. And I typically convert stuff like this to black and white. Look for the
Yeah,
direction of the lines. Because I'm sitting here
yeah,
right now looking at this, and I'm seeing all these diagonals, and I'm like, I never really noticed those before, but they're really strong. Like
right,
diagonals in this image. But that's kind of how I go out. When I go out, I look for the shapes and the shadows and the shapes that the shadows make. And that chair was just a bonus. The way the light was just far enough up on that balcony that the light was hitting it. And I make sure I move around and make sure that there's nothing poking in my edges and something that's going to distract from what I see when I'm
right.
looking at it. So
And for any photography collectors out there, she also has this available for sale.
I do. Most of my fine art architecture is for
Yeah.
sale.
I love this photo. When I told you about the podcast and you sent me this photo that you were really proud of, I definitely see why. It is such a cool photo.
And I just had it printed, and it's become my favorite. Like, every time I look at it, I'm like, it's really cool printed too. It really
Yeah.
is.
Thank you so much for breaking down this photo with me. Where can listeners connect with you online? I know where, but
I'm pretty much everywhere, but I have 2 websites. I have a laurinovak.com is my fine art site where I sell my fine art work, and I do blogs about fine art hanging and travel stories. And then I also have seewithlaurie.com, which is where I run mentoring and photo tours. So
awesome.
those are 2 places.
I will be linking to this photo and to Lauri's sites in the show notes. Thank you for listening to Photo Breakdown. For the show notes and to see the photo talked about today, visit photobreakdown.com.